What if some of the anxiety, panic attacks, or emotional reactions you struggled with for years aren't really the problem, but the symptoms of unresolved memory your brain has never fully processed? Welcome to the next episode of Beyond the Couch with me, Graeme Wood. Today I am joined by Barry Neale, one of the UK's most experienced hypnotherapists, and we're going to be exploring a fascinating therapy that's helping people overcome trauma, PTSD, and phobias far more quickly than we ever thought possible. So, Barry, over to you. Just give us a little bit. You've been involved in hypnosis for over 4 decades now.
I started my interest in hypnosis when I was 13, which is now 51 years ago. Um, and obviously back then it wasn't very easy to get any information. If you were lucky, you could get a book in a health food store or something like that, or maybe an old library. Um, but then since then, I mean, I had a couple of normal jobs, but I then got involved more in hypnosis, went on a number of training courses. And since then, I've been a full-time hypnotherapist. So I've been a trainer of NLP for over 30 years now, a trainer of hypnotherapy for over 30 years now. And all during that time, I've run a full-time practice. What you will find in this profession, which I find is quite sad, is a lot of trainers have never run a full-time practice. They're good trainers, but they not necessarily had the in the trenches experience. So when something doesn't go to plan, they not necessarily have a good answer for you because they've not run into that problem. So I've had that's where I've differed from a lot of the trainees is that I've got the experience of running full-time practice for the many years, and to this day I still run a full-time practice. So yeah, I've got a kind of bit of experience.
So when people hear the word trauma,
Mm.
we always think of trauma as having a capital T. Obviously, imagine major war, major disasters. Is that what actually trauma means?
Well, like a lot of things, it depends on how you want to define it. Um, Words are one of those things that you can have multiple explanations for, and over the years, it's become twisted in a number of ways. So I think when we want to look at something like trauma, we want to look at some of the official diagnosis criteria. And the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual, which is what is used by the clinicians, has a couple of definitions of what they class as trauma. And the first one is labeled acute stress disorder. This typically is something that's around for about a month or so. So someone will experience something horrible and they will be stressed and discombobulated for about a month or so. And then you have PTSD. Now, the official line from the DSM is that, in fact, both disorders have to, the person must be exposed to an actual threat. So there's either threat of death or serious injury, sexual violence, um, either firsthand or as a witness. That's what they would define it as. And it also requires the presence of cognitive, psychological, and sensory impairment to confirm the diagnosis. So we can use the word trauma, but then there's the official line of it. And so someone who's experiencing PTSD, for example, they will be re-experiencing the trauma in the form of thoughts, rumination, nightmares, flashbacks. There might be avoidance of the memory, which is often I mustn't think of that. I mustn't think of that. They mustn't have those thoughts. They mustn't have those feelings. So there's a lot of avoidance going. There can be then changes in cognition and mood. There could be some form of memory loss. They may have a lot of negative beliefs about themselves. Um, and they may then develop sort of an estrangement from friends and family members because no one quite understands them. They also will probably have some form of hypervigilance. Um, they may have angry outbursts and self-destructive behaviors. So when we look at the true diagnosis of PTSD, that's the sort of criteria that we're looking for. But then you have people just saying, well, that was traumatic. And I think we should be careful, certainly as therapists, certainly as hypnotherapists, NLP practitioners, or whatever. One of the things we're told is we should not diagnose. We are not licensed to diagnose, so we shouldn't be diagnosing someone as having trauma. Um, and so if someone says, yes, I'm traumatized by something, okay, great. So we want to break that down and find out how specifically are they thinking? What is going on? Um, I think the big problem with the word trauma now is become a buzzword. And that could be a bit of a problem because when you think of something as being um, a problem memory to someone who says it's a traumatic memory,
Yeah.
that's a different way of thinking,
Yeah.
right? And so we have to be very, very careful with our words. Particularly as hypnotherapists, we should understand that words carry great power. So I don't want to be saying, tell me about that traumatic memory.
No, definitely not. So, can an everyday experience create traumas? It doesn't have to be something really, really big. We don't have to see a
Oh, yeah,
going off or something.
yeah, it can be absolutely anything that does that. Um, and so, again, we've got to be careful about what we calling trauma, but any day, everyday experience can create emotional upset for that person.
Right.
Um, and so things like bullying, humiliation, a frightening birth, not just for the mother, but for the father. You may not you may not believe this, but around about 11% of men experience post-traumatic stress disorder after a traumatic birth. Because often what happens is they're standing there watching all this happen and they're totally helpless.
Yeah.
And it's traumatizing. So yeah, it can be what we might consider a normal everyday experience. And also things like emotional neglect, um, the end of a relationship, betrayal, that can be highly traumatic for
Yeah.
people. Repeated criticisms, these could be traumatic. Um, I wouldn't, as I say, I wouldn't diagnose them as trauma, but they can have a traumatic effect on the person. And I think we need to be very careful with this word. I think that's to me is one of the main. What the biggest question to me is, what did the person learn from this experience? How is it affecting them? What is it they learned that's still running their life today? I'm that to me is the bigger thing. That's what I'm going to be looking
That's
for.
one like so. Like this unresolved trauma. Um, yes, we'll use the word trauma, put a small t on it, just to
Yeah.
describe the sort of thing we're trying to go
Yeah.
for. How does that unresolved trauma show up years later when people don't even realize it's connected?
It can come up years later um, because of, from our perspective, from an NLP perspective, from negative anchors. So someone's tone of voice, a facial expression, a bodily sensation, typically as well, anything like that which may trigger the alarm. And the brain is then perceiving something to be a threat.
Right.
One of the things that's come along recently in the last few years, uh, if you look at the book How Emotions Are Made by Lisa Feldman Barrett, who's a neuroscientist, I highly recommend
Brilliant.
people who are listening to read this book because it will change the way you think about what is really going on.
Yeah.
Emotions aren't stored in the body. The brain is making a prediction based on past experience. And so it shows up because people will go into a particular context and the brain will make a prediction, this is going to happen. And it makes that prediction based on past experience. And that prediction is nothing to do with the reality. It's the brain predicting.
Mm.
And we know this from our work with clients because, I'll give you a quick example. I worked with someone before Christmas who had probably one of the biggest fears of flying I'd seen in a long, long time. And she had gone on a plane to try and white knuckle it to try and overcome her own fear. She sat down in the seat whilst they're still loading on other passengers, and the doors were still open. She had a full-blown panic attack and freaked out so bad that she had to be removed off the plane. And she came to see me about a month later. And one of the things I said to her, okay, just close your eyes for a moment and just go back there now in your mind and just tell me what happened. And so as she starts telling me, and I've done no hypnosis, what I've just said, close your eyes.
Yeah.
Tell me what happened. She starts going into that panic, right? Yeah. And I said, oh, I can see her going into this. She's starting to sweat, her breathing rate had increased, and her face flushed. I went, okay, stop. Tell me, on a scale of 0 to 10, where are you right now? And she said, 12. I went, okay.
Yeah.
And I said, look, I've got some very good news for you. And she said, what's that? And I said, you're not scared of planes. And she looked at me as if I was nuts. I was like, what the hell are you talking about? I've just got removed off a plane. I had a panic attack on a plane. It's the plane. I said, yeah, I know, but you're in my office here in the middle of the Essex countryside. And you're 12 out of 10. Where's the plane? How could it be the plane that's causing this, right? It's not the plane. She was having the thought, and the brain's predicting, oh my God, it's all happening over again. But it wasn't the plane that was causing it. But then the other question, I said, look, that feeling looked really real. You were really panicking then. She went, oh my God, it's the worst feeling in the world. She said, I cannot control it. I said, all right, okay. Can I ask you a couple of questions? When you were on the plane and you had this feeling of panic, what was the feeling telling you? And she said, I've got to get off the plane. The plane is going to crash. Now, that makes perfect sense, right? Because I don't know about you, but if I was on a plane and it was about to take off and I knew it was going to crash, I'd be panicking and wanting to get off too, right? So her response is absolutely logical. But then I asked the second question, okay, did the plane crash? Plane did crash, right? And so her brain was making a prediction, but the prediction was wrong. And that is what's going on. Our brains are making predictions. And so this is what happens years later, is our brain's making a prediction about what this means. Whenever we go into a situation, our brain is thinking, what's happening? What does this mean? And then it makes a prediction about how to respond. And so it's making that prediction based on past experience. And so the real skill in therapy really is about changing the brain's predictions.
And I think that's it. There's anxiety, panic attacks, phobias, confidence, even going to relationships, things like that. That's all us predicting what might happen in the future.
It's absolutely predicting it.
What's happened in the past. So
yeah.
Do you think as people, not just as therapists, but as people, we're actually becoming better at noticing these behaviors, recognizing these behaviors within ourselves, or we're just simply better at labeling more experiences as trauma?
I think the answer to that question is yes. Both are happening.
Right.
Right. So both things are happening there. I don't think it's an either or situation. We now recognize a lot of experience which perhaps in the past were minimized, including like abuse, coercion, maybe childhood adversity, all those sorts of things. That's progress, right? That's a good thing. But the word trauma can become so broad now that it describes every disappointment or uncomfortable emotion. Oh, I went out the last night and this happened and I'm traumatized by it. And if everything is trauma, then the word loses all meaning. So I think we have to be very, very careful with it. And one of the things, the downside of social media is there are a lot of trauma experts out there. And now we've got this thing called trauma-informed therapy, which pretty much says, okay, if a person's got anxiety, they got this, they got that, they got this, they got that, then that means they must have had some form of trauma. And so they are mind reading that that's the case. That to me is a big problem. And because I've been in therapy for many, many years, I've seen this happen before and it's problematic. Back in the 1980s, therapists used to work, if they were working with someone who was, say, obese, they would think that if a person was more than 40 pounds overweight, that meant that they had been abused as a child. And so they would go off using regression techniques and whatever, looking for that abuse. And that caused the whole of this false memory syndrome that was massive in the 80s and 90s, because people will start with a theory and then try and prove it. And so this, unfortunately, with the best intentions, the trauma-informed bit is doing the same thing. Oh, look, they've got that, that, and that, and that. That must mean it's trauma. And see, the other thing is worth thinking about. Look, trauma isn't the experience. This is the big mistake. People think trauma is the experience. It's not the experience. Let me give you some examples of this. And one of the things that drives me nuts is I watch the TV news and you'll see a disaster happen somewhere. And the news reporter will say, oh my God, those people are going to be traumatized for the rest of their life. Maybe. Because there's been some research on this. And I love reading research because it just blows away a lot of your preconceived ideas. One piece of research showed that they looked at people who'd had a catastrophic physical injury where they'd lost a limb. So they either lost an arm or a leg. Now, I don't know about you, I would call that a traumatic injury, right?
I guess so, yeah.
That's as far as injuries go, that's right up there, right?
Yeah.
And they then interviewed these people some time afterwards to find out what the effects were. Now, 30% of those people were traumatized by that event and had symptoms of post-traumatic stress. 30%. Another 30% just got on with their life. They just dealt with it, got on with their life. The last 30%, and this is where it gets curious, the last 30% not only were not traumatized by it, but they thought of it as a positive experience. They said it was the best thing that ever happened to them because it made them stop and reevaluate their life, and they're now doing things they would have never done before. And you often hear this with people who have things like cancer and survive the treatment, and they go, you know, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. You know, and as a result of that, I got out. I did like the horrible marriage I was in, and I got out the horrible job, and I now start doing things, and I'm really enjoying my life. And so it's not the event, it's the meaning we associate to it. This is why you can have two people witness exactly the same thing, and one person's traumatized, and the other person is going, that's just life.
Yeah.
So it's the meaning, not the event.
So you use a process called MEMI. Now, most therapists would have heard of EMDR.
Yeah.
But what is MEMI? What's the difference in EMDR and MEMI?
Okay. Well, let me backtrack a little bit as to why I'm using MEMI. As I mentioned, obviously, I've been training in hypnosis and NLP for many, many years. But I've also trained in EMDR. I did the full 6-day course, which is the one that's sort of reserved for licensed professionals. I managed to get on that course. And I have to tell you, as an experienced NLP trainer, when I went on the course, I was seriously underwhelmed by it.
All right.
It bearing in mind there were 6 days of it, and quite frankly, I could teach you it in 10 minutes. It is it's certainly better than traditional counseling. So if your only tool is counseling and talk therapy, EMDR is like a big step up. But if you come from an NLP background, it's like, But it certainly had some effect. But it certainly, from my experience, it wasn't anywhere as good as it could be. And I think one of the reasons was it tried to comply with the sort of evidence-based medicine and streamlined it. And so every therapist started doing the same. And it lost a lot of its effectiveness. So I kind of discarded EMDR. I did also train, I've trained in several of the other eye movement techniques, including in IEMT and brain spotting. Now, I've got nothing bad at all to say about IEMT at all. If you haven't trained in it, go ahead and train in it. It's very, very good. But there were some applications of it that I didn't use. But brain spotting and EMDR, as far as I'm concerned, they have a major problem. And that is it's a bit like exposure therapy. So in EMDR, what you do, if for those who are not clear on it, you have the person think of the traumatic memory. And if you know anything about NLP, if someone's got a traumatic memory, the memory is going to be right up close to them, right in front of them. It's going to be like here, right? And then they have the person, they just use a bilateral eye movement. Now, from an NLP perspective, if we know the traumatic memory is right here, and you're getting them to move their eyes through it, you are exposing them to it. And you often get really big abreactions with EMDR because the person's thinking of the terrible memory, they're trying to move their eyes, they're sobbing. It's really hard on the client.
Yeah.
Brain spotting takes that to an even better degree, or worse degree, as it were. Because what they do is they have one of these, which is a pointer. And they'll find out what they call the brain spot, which is the location where they say that the traumatic memory is located. And they'll do a series of movements to find out where it is. But let's say they say, right, it's over here. So when you look over here, that's when you feel traumatized. Yes. Okay, keep looking over there. Right. And and you have to use this pointer because if you just sat there with your finger, your arm would drop off because you're going to be there for 40, 50 minutes.
Ooh.
Right. Because and then you're holding them there and they're looking at the pointer. And what is happening is it's exposure therapy.
Yeah.
And they start thinking about it and they'll tell you, oh, this happened. Oh, and this reminds me, this something else happened similar like that. Oh, and something else happened. And they're just sobbing for the whole session. Does it get results? Yeah. It's really hard on the client. And it's really hard on the therapist as well. It's not something I choose to do with the client. And so I became aware, I already done another, I looked at eye movement integration, which was something that came out of the work of Connie Ray Andreas of NLP Comprehensive fame. And for those who don't know who Connie Ray Andreas is, please Google her. She's one of the leading lights in NLP. And she created this back in the 80s, early 90s, when she'd first heard about eye movement, EMDR. And she created a variation of it. And it was a kind of throwaway technique. It was never really taught as part of the NLP practitioner course. It was just something that came and went. And I can't remember, it must have been 5 years ago. I became aware of the work of Dr. Mike Denninger, who's a PhD psychologist. And he had significant training in NLP and Connie Ray Andreas's eye movement integration and created this thing called MEMI. And it's multi-channel eye movement integration. And to me, when I suddenly was exposed to this and suddenly saw it working, this, after 50 years of looking, was the most powerful method I've ever seen to work with trauma because it works on so many different levels. And it's when people say, oh, okay, it's another eye movement technique. That's just like EMDR. Well, to me, that's a bit like saying that Ericksonian hypnosis and past life regression is the same because they both use hypnosis. Just because they use eye movements doesn't make them the same therapy by a long stretch. And so EMDR is so much more powerful. It's also much, much safer for the client, much, much kinder to the client. And so since using that, I've noticed that people make very, very dramatic changes very, very quickly, particularly with heavy duty PTSD, really traumatic memories. And so to me, it is so much better than EMDR. It's light years ahead of it. So that's why and I then pestered Mike, okay, how do I become a trainer so I can bring it to the UK? And as a result, I became a trainer last year, I think it was. And now I put on several trainings, and I'm about to put on the third training here in the UK. So to me, it's the go-to technique for traumatic memories. But the thing is, it doesn't just work with trauma, it works with any type of stuck state. So phobias, fears, anxieties, any stuck state, because it works at the level of the brain predictions and it completely changes the brain's prediction. And that's why it works so well.
Because I was going to ask, a lot of us use eye movements because they are so powerful when it comes to the emotional memories. What actually happens inside the brain during this?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that is something we really there needs to be a lot more research on. A few years ago, there was a study that showed, and I hate these kind of studies because I hate any animal experiments, but they had some studies where they had rats in a particular situation that were traumatized. They then passed a horizontal light across in front of them, and they were hooked up to ultrasound machines and whatever, God knows what. And what they found was it depotentiated the amygdala. And so there was a change in the amygdala's response with eye movements. So that was the first bit of research that said, oh, right, there is some neurology behind this. But to me, what's really happening is it's about memory reconsolidation and prediction error. That's what is happening. Because let's say someone has got a traumatic memory. The brain then predicts every time I think about this, I'm going to panic and I'm going to freak out. So that's the prediction. I cannot think about that memory without freaking out. What MEMI does is it breaks down that memory and gets them to see them in a completely different way, whilst anchoring them to positive resources, using therapeutic dissociation. And then it does various eye movements. And there's not just one across the horizontal. There's 5 different eye movements, which are grouped together in 4 different sets, each one with a purpose. Also within it, we don't just move the eyes, because we're also hypnotherapists. We use suggestion at the same time. And that again adds another dimension to it, which is again why it's called multi-channel. And then what's happening is the brain's prediction is being screwed with. The brain is prediction. If I think about this memory, I will freak out. Now, all of a sudden, they are sitting there comfortably in a chair, relaxed, feeling resourceful, and they're seeing the memory in a dissociated point of view. That straight away is a prediction error. That's the first time they thought about it like that. They can now see it over there and they're not bothered by it and they're feeling resourceful. Now you start moving their eyes in various different locations. That is a massive prediction error. That's not meant to happen, right? And then at every step, and this is one of the key bits that I think MEMI really shines with, is that we track what happens after every set of eye movements. So we go after what's changed in the visual modality, what's changed in the auditory modalities, what's changed in the kinesthetics, not just like the proprioceptive, but also the emotional levels. What's changed? And every time you ask that question, is that the same or different? The person has to go meta to the experience again. That again is a prediction error. And so there is one prediction after another prediction after another prediction error. And eventually the brain goes, this isn't a problem. I can think about this now. And the typical response you get at the end of the session is, it just seems like a memory now.
Yeah.
And so that's what's going on. It just seems like a memory.
And
so
I think
that to me is what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was,
prediction error.
As you were saying that, as you're talking through that, I was thinking of a time when I was a kid, I'd had quite a bit of dental work done. I wasn't the best at brushing my teeth, I got to admit. No, No, certainly not brushing all of them. And I actually did, after I had a load of stuff drilled out and they hit a nerve, I ended up with a bit of fear about going to the dentist. And again, I think I didn't go for about 5, 6 years until it started to hurt again. And I'd worked myself into a state the day of going in there. But after they'd put it, and I was sitting in the car outside, just waiting. I suddenly thought, that wasn't as bad as I thought. Now, yeah, I had to grin and bear it and really face up to going to it. But the effect afterwards was nowhere near as bad as I'd imagined. And I think possibly people may try to avoid therapy like I tried to avoid the dentist because I don't want that painful experience. And I think the therapist, quite a lot of the talk is there. So tell me about your childhood. Tell me what it was like. Tell me. How does this help without having to endlessly revisit the past?
So let's look at both of those aspects first, because you're right. And many of the clients that I work with have been through one therapist after another, and they've still got the problem. And when I say to them, okay, I'm going to work differently, we are not going to be trawling through your past, reliving everything that ever happened to you. They breathe a sigh of relief. They don't want to go back there. And the thing is, you don't need to go back there to resolve these things. It's a complete myth. To me, that whole idea, imagine this scenario, you fall down your stairs and break your leg. That way of doing therapy is a bit like taking you back up to the top of the stairs and pushing you back down again to see why you fell. That's not helping, right?
No.
If you're at the bottom of the stairs with a broken leg, you need to get your leg fixed. You need to change the meaning of it and then get some rehabilitation and get back to full function. So first of all, clients will breathe a sigh of relief when I mention that you don't have to relive it at all. In fact, MEMI works so well that you can do it content free. So often I work with people who've been through horrible things, and a huge percentage of my clients are women, and sometimes it's memories of abuse. And they would feel really uncomfortable telling me the details of that. I don't need to know. I am no need to know at all for this technique to work. And we are not getting them to relive it in any way, shape, or form. We are getting them to momentarily think about it, just to activate it in the neurology. You have to get it activated in the neurology first. That's the first step. Because what then happens is when it's activated, the memory itself becomes plastic. Protein synthesis starts to occur, and the memory itself can become altered at that point. So you do have to activate it first.
Yeah. You got to poke the bear.
Yeah, but you just take, okay, so you've got this terrible memory. Yeah, okay, that's it.
That's all you need. Yeah.
That's activated,
yeah.
right? I go, okay, don't imagine that happening over there. You're sitting here in the chair, you're safe. It's the 2nd of August, you're sitting in the chair. That's in the past. Yeah, okay, great. And that's all we need to do. We don't need to have them wallow in it. We don't need to know the ins and outs of it. We're not looking for some hidden meaning. And so, yeah, we are not getting the client to relive it. And that's a huge, huge relief for many of our clients.
So, some myths about, again, I think you've spoken a lot of the myths about trauma, but what do you think the biggest misconceptions people have about trauma?
Probably that the event permanently damaged them. And that's still sitting inside of them as a physical object waiting to be released. In the last 20 or so years, with the book The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, he posited this idea that trauma is held in the body. There's no evidence for this, and if you look for, and again, more recent research by Lisa Feldman Barrett, this is not the case. It's in the brain.
Yeah.
Yes, there are signals sent out to the body, no question, but it's not stored in the body. It's a prediction that's happening in the mind, and then so basically it's kind of like a learned protection. The brain made a prediction, about danger that was certainly understandable at the time, but it's failed to update. And even when people get experiences to the contrary, so like, for example, if that woman had stayed on the plane and got to a destination and the plane didn't crash, it wouldn't have updated because she would have gone, well, it didn't crash that time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was lucky that day.
Yeah.
And so the excuse making machine would kick in. And so it wouldn't have updated just because they'd had one or two experiences that were contrary to it. You have to create a full body prediction error for it to work. But the key to me is that people aren't broken.
Is every emotional problem rooted in trauma?
No, I wouldn't say that. No. It could be. But it could be on anything else. I mean, again, it depends on your definition of trauma. Anger, for example. Anger is always about unfairness. Something's unfair.
Yeah, and I think that's a big one, is actually specifying what is trauma.
Yeah, exactly. Because, and using anger as an example, typically, and anxiety also, is not necessarily trauma. A lot of time, and I use this example when I'm working with people, a lot of times it was the crap that people were taught as kids. You and I were taught so many things as children that were fundamentally not true. But we've lived our lives based on some of these things. Like, can you remember when you were a kid? I don't know if you had any brothers or sisters or friends, and if you were playing with them, you were told, play fair. You must play fair. Be fair.
Yeah.
Right? And then you get in the real world. Hey, life's not fair. And you wonder why you get pissed off and anxious, right? There's no trauma there. No trauma. Or we might be told things like, everyone must get on with everybody. We must all get on with each other.
Got to give them a chance, they're only little.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we learn so many things as kids. And here's an example. Good things happen to good people. Bad things happen to bad people. Is that true?
No, of course it's not.
No.
Of course it's not.
Yeah, but we learn this stuff as kids. And in fact, you and I are programmed with it every single day.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. I want you to think about every single Hollywood movie that you've ever seen in your life. Right? Every single one, the good guy wins, the bad guy loses. Good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people, right? And so when we go through life and then something bad happens to us, we go, this is unfair.
Yeah.
This mustn't happen because I'm a good person. And then we get anxious because, like, why is this happening to me? This shouldn't be happening to me. No trauma, right?
Yeah. And just imagine now watching a Hollywood film where the bad guy does win. Yeah. How disgusted would you be at that film writer?
Yeah. I mean, I seriously, I've racked my brains on this. The only film I can ever remember watching, particularly when I was a kid, the bad guy won, was the first Rocky film. I don't know if you ever saw the first Sylvester Stallone Rocky film.
Yeah.
He loses, and Apollo Creed wins.
Yeah.
And everyone was at the end of the film going, no, this is wrong. And they made the second film, so he won. Right?
Yeah.
And this happens. We are taught everything you say. The good guy, good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people. There's no trauma in that. Albert Ellis, the guy behind rational emotive behavioral therapy, he identified that a lot of people's stress and anxiety comes from them having musts in their life. This must happen, that must happen, that people must behave a certain way. I must be a certain way. And it's rules. And if you work with people with anxiety, you'll find that they have more rules than anyone else. They have more ways to get upset. And they will proudly tell you, it's really common, they'll proudly tell you, I'm a control freak. Okay, how's that working for you?
Yeah.
And see, we live in a world that can't be controlled. We live in a world of uncertainty. And the more rules we have, the more likely we are to be stressed, anxious, and fearful. And so, no, I don't believe that the day-to-day things, every negative emotion has a traumatic beginning. It's just madness. It's the same with what people say about addictions. Oh, every addiction is to do with ACEs in the person's childhood. No, 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 no. Some people just start drinking because they want to go out with their mates, or they start using cocaine because they want to have because everyone else is doing it. Um, it's just one thing that happens. And again, therapists, if they get this belief that everything is trauma, like the trauma informed thing, they'll go looking for things that are not there and then install them. And then you got another problem.
That's why I love the content-free stuff. Absolutely love
Yeah, yeah, I think that's the case. I think there's time for content.
it.
Because sometimes our clients' problems are to do with their home life
Mm.
and their life circumstances. And I'll give you an example of that. Um, some time ago, I had this young girl phone me up and she said, "Help, help, I'm having panic attacks." I said, "Okay, I'm sorry to hear that. How long have the panic attacks been going?" She said, "5 weeks." All right, okay, pretty soon, right? What happened 5 weeks ago? My boyfriend moved in. Okay, how's that going? Not very well. He's abusing me. I said, "All right, okay, I get it. I can't help you." She said, "Why?" I said, "You need to dump your boyfriend.
Mm. Oh
This
yeah.
isn't a therapy
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
Your brain is telling you this ain't working." And so one of my ways of thinking is, and her response to that was, "I can't, I love him." I know, but that's the problem. And so what my way of thinking about what we class as negative emotions is that they're nothing more than warning lights on the dashboard of your car. They are there to tell you there's something you need to pay attention to. That's what they are. So, for example, someone comes in and says, "I'm lonely." I'm not going to pick out my loneliness script, or I'm not going to go, "Oh, lonely, MEMI." No, there's one cure for loneliness: other people.
Yeah.
So we need to work with, so sometimes we need content because sometimes not all of our problems that people come into us with are psychological. A lot of the times, they're their environment. There's what's going on in their life. And sometimes there's a practical solution to it. And that emotion is there for a reason. It's there to tell them that there's something they need to pay attention to. It's like if I work with someone with public speaking anxiety, um, one of the things from NLP is you ask an outcome question. How do you want to be instead? What do you want? And they might say, "I want to be calm. I want to be completely calm and relaxed when I'm doing public speaking." Well, I don't know about you, but I've seen calm and relaxed public speakers, and after about 5 minutes, I've been bored out of my mind.
Yeah.
Right? That's not a good outcome. And sometimes, and let's say you had the magic wand and you created that calmness, and they were completely calm, relaxed whenever they were doing a presentation. And what might happen is they might turn up to a presentation, a really important presentation, maybe a business thing, with 500 people there, and they just think to themselves, "Yeah, I'll just wing it."
Mm.
They're not prepared.
No.
And so sometimes the anxiety is there to tell you to
Yeah.
prepare.
Yeah.
So that's a really good, anxiety in that context is really good. You don't want to be getting rid of that. Right? You don't want to be getting
Yeah.
rid of that. You should feel anxious to a degree.
Mm.
Have you prepared? Yes. Oh, okay, great. So no, I don't believe that every negative emotion has a traumatic core. No, that makes no sense.
Yeah. Awesome.
Also, this whole idea that there is a root cause to every problem is utter nonsense, and it does not fly in what we know about neurology and how memory works. Memory is not like a root,
Right.
and people's problems aren't linear. So yeah, no, I don't accept that.
So if someone's been listening to this today and they recognize themselves in any part of this conversation, either living with anxiety, the old memories, their emotional reactions that they just can't explain, what would you want them to know?
That it's just a pattern of their thinking. That when I go back to the woman with the plane phobia, she's sitting in my office 12 out of 10. It can't be the plane that's causing this, right?
Mm.
What's causing it is she's thinking, but she's forgetting that she's thinking. And we know we've got this phrase of the body or the mind cannot tell the difference between a real or an imagined experience.
Mm.
That's what's happening there.
Yeah.
Her brain is making a prediction, plane's going to crash even when there's no plane. And this is a pattern of thinking. That thinking is happening right now. So yeah, your past has an effect on that. But what's happening in the moment is the person is thinking and they're believing their thoughts and they're believing their feelings. One of the biggest problems I think that's caused so much anxiety in the last 20 years is the self-help movement. Trust your feelings. Listen to your body. No, don't do that. Your feelings lie to you all day, every single day. This poor woman, her feelings were telling her the plane is going to crash.
Yeah.
It was lying. Even taking this to, people say, well, you've got to trust your intuition. No, not necessarily. There are thousands upon thousands of people lying in jails around the world who are totally innocent, but the detective had an intuition that they were guilty. And then when DNA evidence comes along, they sure enough prove that that person was innocent. So it's just a feeling. It's not a command to do something. When I work with people with OCD, they'll have an obsessive thought and they think the thought is a command for them to do a behavior. It's not, it's just a thought. And so if people are going through problems, it's because they're kind of scared of their own internal experience. And it's not the thought that's the problem, it's their resistance to thinking it. I mustn't think this thought. I mustn't have this feeling. And again, the second thing that's causing the problems, not just trust your feelings, is this whole idea of the law of attraction, that you must think positively. And you can think about something bad happening until you're blue in the face. It won't make it happen.
No.
I use this example with my clients because some of these people have heard about law of attraction and they're so scared of their thoughts. I don't know who I'm a bit out of date these days. I don't know who the current pop idol is, the heartthrob, but a few years ago it was Justin Bieber, right?
Yeah.
And so the young girls around the world went mad about Justin Bieber. Millions of them, posters and photographs up on the wall. Justin Bieber, writing in their notebooks at school, Mrs. Justin Bieber, Mrs. Justin Bieber, playing his records all day, every day. I'm going to marry Justin Bieber.
Mm.
Totally obsessed. Not one of them married him.
Didn't happen.
You can think about these things till you're blue in the face.
Yeah.
It doesn't change reality.
Yeah.
And so the law of attraction model, I think I see so many people who in for anxiety who've been down that road and are scared of their own thoughts. And then the other ones are the people who have feelings and think they need to respond to them every time. And they mustn't feel sad. They mustn't feel angry. Why not? It's okay.
Yeah. If you want to feel happy, it's okay to feel sad as well. You can't have one without the other.
Well, you can't because it will habituate. If you were happy all the time, you wouldn't notice it.
Yeah.
The nervous system would just even out and you wouldn't notice it.
Exactly. Barry, it's been great talking to you. Those people watching,
you're welcome.
Either as fellow therapists who want to learn from you or people who've seen what you're saying, you ring a bell and think, I need his help. How can I get in touch with you?
If you're interested in therapy, my website is hypnosisessex.com. that's the therapy website. And if you go on there, you can just arrange a free 15-minute phone or Zoom call. If you're interested in being trained in MEMI, which if you're a therapist, I would highly recommend it, not just because I'm doing it, but if you're really interested in getting fantastic results with your clients. I'm running the next training this month on the weekend of the 15th and 16th of August. It's 10 a.m. till 5 p.m. It's online. However, you have to attend because I need to know that you're participating and you're getting it in order for you to get your certificate. It's not one of these things where you just pay your money and then you watch it at your leisure and then get a certificate when you have not proved that you're capable. So you have to attend. But it is, as I say, to me, it's the most powerful method I've come across in 50 years to work with trauma and stuck states. And so I would recommend it. So that's what they can do. And if you go to my courses website, which is changeworksacademy.com, you can find details of it there.
And I'll put all those links in underneath. So, Barry Neale, thank you so much for your time. Been great speaking to you. Managed to get you pinned down at last. I haven't been trying too long to get hold of you. Barry Neale from Hypnosis Essex and MEMI and all these other wonderful, amazing things you do. Me, Graeme Wood, representing Hypnosis. If you've enjoyed what you've liked, please hit that subscribe button down below. Any questions for Barry, put them in the comments and we'll make sure they get answered. Thank you very much for watching. See you on the next one.
Bye.